Fly Me to the Moon centers on the fictional Apollo 11 flight director Cole Davis, but his real-life counterpart continued living a fascinating and fulfilling life after the moon landing. The Apple original movie starts 8 months before man lands on the moon, exploring the public relations team's effort to sell the US on the moon landing. The big city marketer Kelly Jones pushes up against the work of the Apollo 11 flight director Cole Davis, creating tension within the agency. By Fly Me to the Moon's ending, Neil Armstrong has taken the first step on the moon. Other than the astronauts and the president, Fly Me to the Moon's characters are fictional. Nobody named Mo Burkus or Kelly Jones was involved in the space race in the same capacity as the characters. As such, their stories cease when the movie ends. However, Cole Davis was loosely inspired by an actual person involved in the Apollo 11 mission. Fly Me to the Moon's Cole Davis is loosely based on Gene Kranz. Gene Kranz was the flight director for Apollo 11. While the characters in Fly Me to the Moon are fictional, Cole Davis takes inspiration from the real-life flight director for the Apollo 11 mission, Gene Kranz. In his book Failure is Not an Option, Mission Control from Mercury to Apollo, Kranz shares that he served as a pilot in the military before working with NASA, as Cole Davis did in Fly Me to the Moon. He also wanted to be an astronaut but ended up working in the control room for NASA instead. Many of the events involving Cole Davis also happened in real life. Gene Kranz harbored a lot of guilt for his involvement in Apollo 1, though the idea that he was directly on site when they opened up the capsule is a change to the true story in Fly Me to the Moon. In real life, Kranz gave his team a speech the day after the tragedy about their shared responsibility in what occurred. The movie also leaves out the Kranz dictum, the flight director's speech about their new motto in the aftermath, tough and competent. The speech Cole gives before the Apollo 11 takeoff in Fly Me to the Moon matches up with the sentiment of what Kranz said to his controllers before the launch. According to his interview with KPRC2, Kranz stated, "I will stand behind every decision you will make. We came into this room a team, and we will leave as a team." He also quieted everyone down when they started loudly celebrating because they needed to focus. However, Fly Me to the Moon makes a few notable changes to the actual flight director's background. Kranz didn't have a romance with anyone on the NASA public relations team. He married a woman named Marta Cadena before he joined the agency. He also didn't learn about a secret government project related to Apollo 11 because, despite what Fly Me to the Moon says, NASA never faked the moon landing. Gene Kranz was NASA's flight director for Apollo 13. Gene Kranz's team saved the Apollo 13 astronauts. While Gene Kranz was the leader who helped land astronauts on the moon, he's perhaps best known for his role as the flight director for Apollo 13. This mission was meant to land on the moon, but things went horribly awry when one of the oxygen tanks exploded, shutting down 2 of the 3 fuel cells and damaging the second oxygen tank. Kranz was about to leave when the astronauts contacted them with the famous words, "Houston, we've had a problem." The flight director kicked into high gear, getting his men in line to save the lives of the astronauts. Kranz and his men decided that the best way to save their men was for the spacecraft to slingshot around the moon using its gravity rather than perform a direct abort. He placed 3 engineers in charge and went into problem-solving mode. For every success, there was another issue. The astronauts were dehydrated, sleep-deprived, and suffering through approximately freezing temperatures. By the last stretch, the control team had been working for almost 80 hours straight to get the astronauts home. Through luck, preparation, and immense teamwork, the Apollo 13 astronauts came home alive. Via BBC Sky at Night magazine. Gene Kranz's life after retiring from NASA. Kranz wrote 2 books about his time at NASA. Gene Kranz continued working at NASA throughout the rest of the space race. After working on Apollo 17, Gene Kranz retired from NASA in 1994. The famous flight director went on to give many interviews and speak at lectures. Over the years, he donated many of the vests he wore during missions to charity. Kranz's white Apollo 13 vest and pin were donated to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum for preservation after he spoke there in 2005. Kranz went on to write 2 books, Failure is Not an Option, Mission Control from Mercury to Apollo, which came out in 2000, and Tough and Competent, Leadership and Team Chemistry, which was released in 2023. Gene Kranz is still alive as of Fly Me to the Moon's release at the age of 90. How accurate was Fly Me to the Moon's portrayal of Cole Davis? Cole was only loosely based on Gene Kranz. The faked moon landing from Fly Me to the Moon. Channing Tatum's Fly Me to the Moon character, Cole Davis, was only loosely based on Gene Kranz. He captured some key elements of Kranz's personality and role as a flight director, but almost everything about his personal life was fictionalized. However, many things remain similar between fact and fiction. For example, in real life, Kranz was not in charge when the Apollo 1 fire broke out, but he always blamed himself, via Click 2 Houston, so the movie had him in charge to show his guilt.